As you may recall, every player starts the game with a starting deck of 9 cards. We're going to go through each of these miracles and discuss what they do. As you may recall, every miracle has a number in the top left. That is the number of belief points you must pay in order to play that miracle. Each follower that you flip over to have pray produces 1 belief point. The first miracle we're going to talk about is also the most straightforward. Pious Benefactor. This is your basic money generating miracle. Every time you play Pious Benefactor, you gain 1 coin. It is far and away the worst money generating miracle in the game, and you have more copies of it than you probably need, but it's there. Pious Benefactor is pretty straightforward. There's really not too much to say about it, other than you're probably going to want to get rid of at least 1 or 2 copies of it using Memory Hole as the game goes on. Which brings us to Memory Hole. Memory Hole lets you look through your hand, discard pile, and deck, find a card you don't want, and remove it from the game entirely. This is a deck cleaning card. As the game goes on, this card becomes more and more valuable, because you will be getting much better cards than your starting cards from the market. This card is how you ensure that you draw those cards consistently. Now the other 4 cards you start with are a little more interesting, and take a little bit more explanation to really understand how to make the most of them. The first of these is Evangelize. Evangelize is superficially very simple. It has a range of 5, it's preemptive, and it allows you to target one of your holy spaces containing less than 4 low units, then place 1 new follower there. Let's talk a little bit about some of the terminology on this card, because we might not have gone over it yet. First, the word preemptive. Anytime you see the word preemptive on a miracle card, that means that that miracle can be played during any player's action phase, not just your own. For example, suppose that during White's turn, White were to move 2 followers adjacent to this temple here. As you can see, Black only has 1 follower on that temple. That's not going to end well for Black. So what Black can do, if Black happens to have Evangelize, is have 2 followers pray, play Evangelize, and then place 1 new follower on that holy space. Suddenly, that space now has an equal number of low units on it, and combat will be a wash. If Black hadn't done that, White would have been able to take that temple. Aside from giving you the ability to suddenly summon reinforcements on a holy space, Evangelize is good for helping to boost your recruitment. Here, because we only have 1 follower on that holy space is not going to recruit any new followers on Black's next turn. Black can have 2 followers pray, and play Evangelize in order to make sure that holy space has 2 or more followers on it so that it recruits a new follower. Let's talk about range. Range is the number of spaces away from your Messiah, non-diagonally, that you can target a miracle. Because Evangelize has a range of 5, both of those spaces are within 5 spaces of the Messiah. They're both within range. Next, let's talk about Providence. Providence is your quintessential early game defensive card. It's preemptive, it has a range of 2, and it allows you to choose a target space. During combat this turn, the last low unit on the target space that would have been killed survives instead. Providence is exceptionally useful for defending temples and also for taking enemy temples. Suppose, for example, that on White's turn, White moved 1, 2, and moved the Messiah there. White could have 1 follower pray and play Providence. This would ensure that after combat, White would still have that follower left adjacent to that temple. The temple would be empty, and White would get to capture it. Whenever you play Providence, make sure to place a Providence token to mark the space that you're protecting. Because White played Providence on that space, Black is now in pretty deep trouble. Suppose Black doesn't have Evangelize. How can Black save that space during White's turn? Well, remember, Providence is a preemptive miracle, so Black can play it too before combat happens. And it is range 2, but what do you know? That space is within 2 spaces of the Messiah, so Providence can target it. Black just needs 1 person to pray, to pay the belief cost for Providence, then Black can protect this space. Combat will be a wash. Neither of the followers will die, and Black will get to respond to that threat on his terms, or her terms. Providence's main limitation is that it has a very low range. It can only target 2 spaces away from the Messiah. This means that if your Messiah is sitting all the way back on your holy city, you're probably not going to be able to protect people on the front lines using Providence. Keep this in mind when you're playing. Possibly the most powerful of the starting game miracles is Fruit of Knowledge. Fruit of Knowledge cannot be played in the first round, except during the last player turn in the turn order. This is to ensure that you can't use it to prevent any player from receiving their first temple. Once everyone has their first temple, though, it's fair game. Fruit of Knowledge is, frankly, an extremely annoying, if not especially powerful, attack card. All Fruit of Knowledge does is it allows you to choose a space within 4 of your Messiah and turn one follower of your choice on that space into a non-believer. In order to make sense of the full range of possibilities with Fruit of Knowledge, we need to talk a little bit about what non-believers are in this game. Non-believers are essentially the same as followers, except for 2 important distinctions. 1, they can never be on or move through holy spaces. And 2, they can never help build temples. The primary use of Fruit of Knowledge is to prevent temples from completing. Suppose that Black was to move their Messiah over here. That's 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces away from White's temple building site, just within range of Fruit of Knowledge. Black can have a follower pray to pay the cost of Fruit of Knowledge, and then turn one of these 4 followers into a non-believer. You must have 4 followers on a space in order to build a temple. 3 followers and 1 non-believer is not going to cut it. That temple is not completing. Another use of Fruit of Knowledge might be to turn one of these followers on a holy space into a non-believer. Because non-believers can never be on holy spaces, whoever played the Fruit of Knowledge card now gets to move that non-believer onto an adjacent space of their choice. So the player might choose to move the non-believer back there. That non-believer is now far out of the way and is going to be unable to reach the front lines anytime soon. Black has now just ruined any recruitment that was going to happen from that holy space. In a situation like this, where a player has created a bubble surrounded by holy spaces, turning a follower into a non-believer allows you to trap that unit inside the bubble. That non-believer cannot get out unless one of those holy spaces is destroyed. Even worse is if a player has created a situation where one of their holy spaces is boxed in on all sides by other holy spaces or other invalid spaces for a non-believer. In this situation, Black can target Fruit of Knowledge 1, 2, 3, 4 to that follower on that space. That non-believer is now trapped on all sides. The Holy City on the left, temples on the bottom and right, and the 2-player bounds above. There is no valid adjacent space for that non-believer, so the non-believer simply dies. Because Fruit of Knowledge is a preemptive miracle, it can also be used defensively. Suppose, for example, that on White's turn, White were to move these 2 followers adjacent to this temple. Because it's a preemptive miracle, Black can use it to preempt that move just there. Black can say, hold on a moment, I have a preemptive miracle I want to use, undo that move for a second. Black can then have a follower pray and play Fruit of Knowledge on his own follower, or her own follower, right there. That follower has now been turned into a non-believer, and Black, as the player that did it, gets to decide what space that non-believer is moved onto. Black moves the non-believer there. That temple is now protected. Essentially, Black whispered to that follower and said, I'm not really the Messiah. That follower lost faith and was kicked out of the temple in a direction of Black's choosing. Incredibly cynical, but effective. And now let's talk about the last of the starting miracles, Edict. Edict is quite possibly the most versatile of all the starting miracles. Edict is preemptive, has no range limit, and allows you to immediately move up to 2 of your low units that have not yet moved this turn. Playing Edict during your turn essentially boosts the total number of low unit moves you can make in the turn by 2. If your Messiah started the turn on a holy space, you can move 8 followers instead of just 6. If your Messiah started the turn on an ordinary space, you can move 11 low units instead of just 9. That's during your turn. During an enemy turn, however, Edict essentially allows you to launch a surprise maneuver. Remember, the text is, you may immediately move up to 2 of your low units that have not yet moved this turn. During any other player's turn, none of your units will have moved. Therefore, they are susceptible to being moved by Edict as a preemptive action. Suppose, for instance, that on White's turn, White was to do this move. Black can have 2 followers pray, and play Edict. Black can now suddenly respond with up to 2 low units during White's turn. Black could, for instance, go 1, 2. Suddenly, the White force is flanked. That encounter is going to go very badly for White, unless White moves up more troops. And in any event, that temple is not getting captured. Similarly, Edict can be used for a sudden advance of your own troops to catch an opponent off guard. You could move this fellow here, for instance, to guard the temple, and for your second move, move someone up here. Suddenly, that temple building site is threatened, and White will need to find some way to respond if that temple building site is going to survive Black's turn. Edict is also useful for withdrawing from small-scale engagements that don't look like they're going to go your way. Suppose White did this. In that situation, White is going to get a 2-to-1 advantage. White will lose only 1 follower, and Black will lose 2. If Black needs those 2 to survive, Black can play Edict and use his 2 moves, or her 2 moves, to beat a hasty retreat. There's one more thing which Edict is extremely helpful for. Edict can be used to counter an enemy Fruit of Knowledge. Suppose that Black goes ahead and uses their Fruit of Knowledge on this group of 4 followers that are starting to build a temple here. If left to their own devices there, those 3 followers and 1 non-believer will not be able to successfully complete that temple. However, with Edict, White can respond immediately even if it's not White's turn. White immediately gets to move 2 low units that have not yet moved this turn. White can move the non-believer off the temple building site as move number 1. And as move number 2, can move a follower onto the temple building site to replace the non-believer. White's temple is now going to complete despite the Fruit of Knowledge. Alright guys, I think that's all I have to say about the starting miracles. This is just giving you a taste of all the nuance and subtlety of this game's miracles. I hope you're as excited as I am to delve into the rest of them. Thanks for watching.